Oh, Prophet, I pray because I see attack of a rocket in Iraq. I pray in Jesus' name.
We head into the newscast with our top focus on West Asia as the heavily fortified green area in Iraq has been attacked with a volley of rockets, with security officials stating that the US embassy was the main target. The attack is the third in a week to target Western diplomatic, military or commercial installations across Iraq. Iraqi security officials say that at least 2 rockets landed within the perimeter of the Green Zone, where the American and other foreign embassies are currently based. At least 1 rocket hit the headquarters of Iraq's National Security Service near the US diplomatic mission, damaging several cars parked there. 1 other rocket crashed into the nearby residential district of Harthia. A statement from the military now says that there have been no casualties and the investigation is currently underway. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has not yet determined blame for the recent rocket attacks in Iraq. Listen in to what the Pentagon spokesperson has to say.
Certainly, we have seen attacks in the past from Shia-backed militias operating inside Iraq. I don't know of any attribution for the one in Erbil from last weekend. I don't think that's been finally determined. And as for the recent attack, again, I don't have any attribution on that either. It's difficult to say with certainty, Bob, whether there's a strategic calculation driving this recent uptick in attacks, or whether this is just a continuation of the sorts of attacks we've seen in the past. But obviously we're going to be working closely with our Iraqi partners, as we have been on the attack last weekend in Erbil. We'll be working with them to get more context about this and try to place it in proper perspective.
The past week has seen the most attacks in months. A volley of rockets targeting an airbase in Iraq's Kurdistan region outside the Erbil airport killed at least 2 people, including 1 foreign contractor and a foreign civilian. On Saturday, another wave of rockets hit the Al-Balad airbase north of Baghdad, where Iraq keeps most of the F-16s it has purchased from the US in recent years. In October last year, the US had threatened to close its embassy in Baghdad if the attacks did not stop. There have been several intermittent violations since then, sparking fears of new hostilities. For more details and a sense of perspective, let's quickly go across to our guest, International Affairs expert Jody Cohen, who's joining us live from Jerusalem at this hour. Jody, thank you so much for joining our newscast. Now, we just heard what John Kirby, the Pentagon spokesperson, had to say. Let me highlight it again. It's difficult to say with certainty whether there's a strategic calculation driving this uptick in attacks or whether this is just a continuation of the sort of attacks we've seen in the past. How do you assess his reaction?
Right, so it's not yet known who's behind these attacks. No group has claimed responsibility. As we heard from his reaction, it's rather, I wouldn't say vague, but non-committant. The US government, the State Department has said that they will follow the lead of the Iraqi government in conducting this investigation and indeed if there's going to be any military response. We don't yet know who is behind the attack. Last week, there was an attack against an airport in Iraq, and that was actually claimed by a little-known Shiite militant group called Guardians of Blood. Now, not very much is known about them. They're thought to be associated with Iran, and so, of course, the State Department is aware that these attacks could have also taken place by Iranian proxies, and they actually said that they, while the investigation is undergoing and we don't yet know who carried out the attacks, they would hold Iran responsible for the actions of proxies against American targets.
Right. It's interesting, Jody, that you're looking at these attacks in totality because it is a third attack in a span of just a week. Although the Shia militia group that claimed credit for the first attacks is widely known to have close ties to Tehran, is something which was also pointed out by you. The Biden administration has refrained from pointing fingers. How do you see the relationship now panning out between Iraq and the new Biden administration in the US?
Yes, so they haven't claimed, they haven't pointed fingers, as you rightly say. And there's also sort of an awareness that Islamic State is still in Iraq. And while we know that the US would like to slowly reduce its military presence in Iraq, we've also heard that NATO is going to be increasing its presence because of the existence of Islamic State still there and because of recent clashes there. So it is still speculation as to who might have carried out the attack. The Biden administration will continue to work very closely with the Iraqi government on this investigation, on military coordination, foreign relations, and all matters.
Right, and since you mentioned NATO, John Kirby, the spokesperson of Pentagon, has also said that while the Pentagon supports NATO's recent decision to deploy additional troops to Iraq, there are no plans to expand US force levels in that country. Could there be a vacuum being taken over by NATO or even Turkey?
It's all up for grabs, isn't it? It remains to be seen the balance of power in the region. We know that Iran would like to have a corridor between Iran, Iraq, Syria, across to Israel, across the Middle East. Another very important factor, of course, is the nuclear deal. We have this almost standoff between the United States and Iran over who will act next. Iran would like to see an end to US sanctions. They have threatened to enrich uranium up to 60%, which is well over the agreed amount of 3.67% in the nuclear agreement. They're talking about limiting access to inspectors. They're looking into uranium metals, which are a known factor of nuclear weapons. So that's the Iranian perspective. And then from the US perspective, they would like to see a return to strict compliance of Iran with the nuclear deal before they then look to lengthen and strengthen the deal, as they say, which would mean increased access to inspections and really a curb on Iran's ambitions to get nuclear weapons.
Absolutely, and now with Joe Biden taking over the US administration, we'll have to wait and watch. Quite a few changes expected to happen out there. Thank you so much, Jodie Cohen, for joining our newscast today. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.